From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and here's what's ahead. K-State's Dan O'Brien will comment on a media report out of China this week indicating that country will remain heavily reliant on feed grain and soybean imports during Dan's weekly segment on the grain market trends. Then we'll have remarks from the Dean of the College of Agriculture at K-State, John Floros, and North Central Kansas farmer Harold Lonsinger from the dedication of the Harold and Olympia Lonsinger Sustainability Research Farm, which took place earlier this week. And our regular Friday guest, K-State's Mary Knapp, can't be with us today because of illness, so in her stead today, K-State's Ron Graber will preview a special K-State Backgrounder Feedlot Field Day set for early October in Lyon County. All that here on Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
We have a number of items to consider on the grain market scene now with Dan O'Brien along with us as he joins us every Friday right here. He's a grain market economist with K-State Research and Extension from his office in Colby, northwest Kansas. Dan, you've just updated your corn balance sheet and price outlook considering the latest information. Let's go right to that and what that analysis has to say.
Well, as we keep moving farther and farther along in the season, closer to harvest, it looks like the USDA's projection, again, which has kind of roundly been questioned by a number of folks because of the production number, probably moving closer and closer to being the actual figure that will come in with. And the question I have is if we'll actually have any final evidence. If that number is high, will we get any evidence of that really literally before January? Before all the harvest numbers are in. It could very well be that there'll be a lot of this, the next 60, 90 days traded based on what the USDA comes out for their number. And if they're going to wait till the very end to make sure they have all the quantity calculations in, then it could be till November or January before we actually see what the number is. That said, let's say if there is a 3 out of 5 chance, 60% chance that USDA's numbers are right, there's still enough of a legacy of crop problems that we had this year that instead of the 169.9 bushels per acre figure that we saw in the U.S., you could still see that number come in at say 167.3, which would be a trend line yield. If there's a 60% chance of that just under 170 bushel number being right, still I would say 35% chance or so of about 1/3 or a little bit more of still ending up with a lower yield. And there's still the possibility of, not very much, but the possibility of a surprise of as low as 164, 165. And, why do I say that? Am I just trying to cast aspersions on our good friends at USDA NAS? Well, of course not. But when you look at the late season weather maps that we have access to via the National Weather Service and other weather watching agencies, we've got some awfully dry conditions that have been coming on for about the last 30 days, particularly the last 2 weeks. In fact, some of the areas that are in long-term drought, i.e. Montana, parts of North Dakota, South Dakota, they've actually caught some moisture of late, and that's a great thing. It's actually helped on some of the wildfires and things they've had going on there. But the area that's been dry for the last month at least has been really the heart of the Corn Belt, running all the way from Michigan into parts of Wisconsin, parts of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and really you look at Kansas, we're in some of the driest areas the last 2 weeks to 4 weeks of any in the country. So how does that affect crops that are almost done? Well, they're not done yet, and it could affect for corn. It's probably really a question, I guess, for our colleagues in KSU agronomy to answer those questions, but you would wonder about how we finish out the crop, particularly for the feed grains. And for soybeans, Again, we've come out of August into this time in September where we're finishing off that crop. I would wonder if these dry conditions could probably affect soybeans more than the feed grains. So I guess we'll have to see. Again, we don't want to be just professional hand-wringers, Eric, in terms of trying to see what problems there could be. Really, I think what we're in the business of is trying to figure out how these USDA numbers that are presented to us, how they stand up to scrutiny, or given the variability in estimates, if we do see some adjustments in them, which way might they go? And these dry conditions and accumulation of problems throughout the year, you'd wonder if they are changed at all. You would wonder if they'd be changed to the lower side in terms of yields and production.
In regard to the price outlook, though, the weight is more toward the 320 range, but with some of these things perhaps checking in, there might be slight improvement in the price outlook.
Yeah, and what we're talking about, the changes that you and I have discussed here, instead of the USDA's projection of 14.18 billion bushels, we're looking at something 200 to 300, maybe 400 million bushels less than that. So instead of the 320 midpoint, in terms of what the USDA has projected, again, if we're down to 167 bushels per acre, same, pretty similar acreage, it's more like about 25 cents higher, about 345. If we get the 1 in 20 chance that, for 164 bushels per acre, it's closer to 360, 370, something like that. So another scenario I think to think on that you and I have talked about that could affect both corn and soybeans right now is the wild card geopolitical conflict scenario. There's been enough discussion about what could happen overseas, particularly in the East Asia, Southeast Asia region, that if there was some type of a geopolitical conflict, it's worth asking the question, well, how would that affect us in agriculture? Really, I think in terms of the weight of trade, you would wonder if it could affect the soybean market probably more than the feed grains, although it could affect all these grain markets where trade is involved. With China, in essence, having to come to Argentina, Brazil, or the United States for supplies, and with the South American crop not done, but still towards the end of its availability export-wise, and the U.S. crop coming on, you would wonder just how some type of a real disagreement over there that would disrupt trade would affect the markets. Well, on the one hand, if something did cause soybean trade to be disrupted, I guess you have different effects in different countries. If, say, China was not willing to buy from the U.S. for whatever deal, that would be a negative for our prices. But then suddenly prices all over the rest of the world would shoot up sky high. It'd shoot up high at a time when there's not much supply left out there. So a lot of times in situations like that, you wonder if we basically just start trading places. If one country buys from the U.S. and then turns around, sells off to someone else for a fee, well, that's kind of an arbitrage mitigating factor. But so we're not trying to cause problems by thinking about that, but you do wonder how commodity markets would be affected. And for us in the U.S., given our prime position in trade, I think our first knee-jerk reaction is to think, well, it's probably going to be negative because it hurts what we're selling, or the quantity of sales off our shores. But I wouldn't be surprised that the initial reaction would be negative, but then the world would start to figure out how to get around some of these issues and probably would mitigate some of that initial downward move if things are happening. Anyway, if someone were to ask me straight out what I thought would happen, that's what I would tell them. I think we'd move downward at first just because of fear, and then eventually, as the arbitrage forces start to enter into that market, we'd probably rebalance and regain some of that initial loss.
Well, while we're talking about this, I want to reference something that you posted on social media earlier this week regarding China as a market for our feed grains, our soybeans, and in the absence of any heightened political tensions, things are set up with respect to China's ability to produce its own, if you will, that really do favor the U.S. It has to do with the lack of arable land in that country.
Yeah, there was an interesting article that came out in the China Daily newspaper. So it's not from someone else's outside observation. This was straight from China, one of their primary news outlets. That basically the headline is that China puts 103 million hectares of farmland under permanent protection. And their issue for years has been that some of the prime arable farmland that they have in China is right in the plains area. that is also just very desirable for where their population centers are. So there's, I guess, kind of similar types of discussions that we've had in the past when we wondered about urban encroachment upon agricultural lands. Well, here they're setting policy regimes, hard policy regimes to protect their farmland. To me, that's saying a couple things. The biggest is that, you know what, they're pretty concerned that they don't have many places to expand to. And their first response will be just like any country's would be ours as well. Well, they'll look to genetic improvements in seed, heightened efficiency, more productivity through cropping systems, etc. And those things will certainly help. But already, with the best efforts they have to date, they're still short in terms of their Chinese soybean imports. They're running right now 92 to 95 million metric tons of imports per year of soybeans, 50-60% of the world's amount. So what you see with a statement like this by China is an acknowledgement that unless they change their diets, literally, or there's some other change that we can't foresee, they're going to have to be in the world market buying soybeans, unless their way of life changes. So that's a positive for anybody in soybean-producing areas in our half of the world, running from Argentina to Brazil to Paraguay to the United States. So it is what it is, and probably when we talk about all these other geopolitical things that can happen, just the idea of food supply security enters in and probably is a mitigating factor in terms of just whatever can happen in these other spheres that affect China and the United States.
And by the way, Dan's full analysis in much greater detail is posted in his weekly notes on the grain trading trends. That can be found at agmanager.info, out of K-State, agmanager.info. As always, Dan, a pleasure. Thanks for the comments.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
He's our regular Friday guest, and considering the grain market trends, that's Dan O'Brien, grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension. Agriculture Today resumes in a moment on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Welcome back. Well, a north central Kansas farmer has given a gift of land to Kansas State University to develop a research farm focusing on sustainable agricultural practices and soil conservation, reclamation, and protection. The dedication of this new K-State research site took place earlier this week on the site near the community of Alton in Osborne County. It will be known as the Harold and Olympia Lonsinger Sustainability Research Farm. In remarks from that dedication, the Dean of the College of Agriculture at K-State, John Floros, outlined the magnitude of this new addition to K-State's research capabilities.
This is the biggest gift given to the College of Agriculture ever. Harold Lonsinger and Olympia giving us that gift in order to help us improve our research, improve our teaching, improve our ability to create new knowledge and provide that new knowledge to the farmers and the ranchers of this state and the world. It's not the fact that it's only a big gift, it's also what the gift is all about. It's a piece of land that we can use to really do things that we couldn't do before in terms of sustaining our efforts to provide better food, more food for the people with less inputs, less things that we put into the land, improve the soil, improve the natural resources, and really leave the land in a better condition than we found it for generations to come.
To fill in here, this is a 2,300-acre gift to K-State, consisting of crop ground and grassland, and some background on the benefactor. Harold Lonsinger was a childhood resident of Pottawatomie County. joining the Army after graduating from high school, serving during World War II in the Pacific Theater, as well as in a non-combat role in Korea. Afterward, he enrolled at K-State, earning his degree in mechanical engineering in 1956. He and his wife Olympia lived in Hutchinson, where he worked as an engineer, retiring in 1984 from Doscossil Food Service as the vice president of engineering for that firm. He and Olympia then moved to Cocker City to farm and raise livestock. And over time, he has developed a great appreciation for soil quality.
I grew up on a farm. And as I relate to anybody that listened to me 2 minutes, I said I can't explain it because in 1944 I was hand shucking corn. I could make about 45 bushel a day without any problem. I hired people to do farming here. I had been successful as an engineer. I had 3 major employers, Kerry Salt Company, Farmarco, which was a big grain cooperative, and Doscossil's meat processor. But I saw people doing this farming, and then they would talk about, they say, well, we got to do soil tests to do this and do that. And of course, my experience as an engineer told me that you're using up the base minerals of that land when you do that. In Pottawatomie County, and in about 35 years, reduced that from productive land to something that would not raise cockleburrs, by simply using one crop and simply removing that crop on a continuous basis. And so that gave me the idea, because I learned enough about chemistry and about life in general, things about the world around us with my engineering training in Kansas State, that there is an end to this point, and you have to be careful about that, because if you don't replace some of the smallest elements, it's a very insignificant thing to most of us, but the micro minerals are not insignificant parts of our creation.
Harold is a very passionate man. He has a vision about the land. He has a vision about what he has done and he can do, and he really understands what it takes to do research for generations to come. That passion that he has is contagious. That passion that he showed to us and to our faculty, it really will help us, move forward in a lot of different ways.
Now, as you know, K-State does operate several research fields throughout Kansas. This new addition brings still more to the table, according to Dean Floros, thanks in large part to the size of the research farm itself.
This is a large piece of land that allows us to do things that we couldn't do with the smaller piece of land that we have before. It's a piece of land that we can test a lot of different hypotheses that we couldn't test before. The results will be applicable not only to central and western Kansas, but all throughout the state, and in many cases all throughout the world, because areas like this one exist all throughout the world. So whatever we find here, the results will be applicable elsewhere. And by doing such research, we actually help the world feed itself for generations to come. This piece of land will give us the ability to study a lot of different weather conditions, to study a lot of different natural resource inputs, from water to all kinds of other things, to study different types of soils and really figure out what can we do with the land that will help us improve not only the outcome, the yield, but also improve the quality of the crops that we produce and improve the quality of the soil, so that next year we're in better shape and the year after that we're in better shape, and how all that fits together with the natural world. How does it fit together with everything else that we do in terms of activities, human activities?
Now, beyond this new capacity for sustainable cropping and grass production research, the new site will open several doors on the agronomic teaching side.
This particular farm, our hope is that it will help us teach our students better, improve the ability not only to do research, but improve our ability to train the next generation of scientists. It will also improve our ability to take the knowledge to the farmer, because it will provide basically a laboratory for the farmers to come in and understand how things happen. It will provide us with a location where we can bring in high school students, elementary school students, and show them what agriculture is all about, what we can do to really help the land help us.
Much of the Lonsinger land is contiguous. It will allow researchers to discover how historical and innovative farming practices impact larger tracts of soil over time. Again, with potential application for Kansas farmers and producers worldwide, there are high aspirations for this research farm, as the Dean and Harold Lonsinger envision it.
I would like to see what the things I've heard, things I've talked in the past, and perhaps this is something that raising maybe hopes beyond, or maybe dreams almost, that you would bring in people here that would really want to do something with this land, that are not afraid to get on their hands and knees and dig around in the dirt and see what is under the surface. That they will take that and that they will look at the end product, that they will start looking at the soil itself and their end product to see if they are producing things. Now they produced, and all of it had a certain element at a level of the micro minerals, of the major minerals, and all of those things. Now all we do is farm the major minerals. You should look to restoring the micro mineral base as a means to an end, which will be improved food quality.
Harold is a very unique individual. The first time I met him, that passion that he had, it was very clear. The idea that he had, it was a very clear idea. The vision that he had, it was a very clear vision. And he was also able to articulate that very clearly to me. When I saw him talking with our faculty, that they really have the expertise to make that happen, and to truly communicate with them at a different level, it was the time I realized that, yes, this is going to work. Because he knows exactly what he's talking about. Our faculty know what they're talking about. Bring the two together. My hope is that 10 years from now, the Harold and Olympia Lonsinger Research Farm, the Sustainability Research Farm, is known throughout the country, known throughout the world for some of the unique results that we have produced. It will take time for sustainability research to really manifest itself, but hopefully by 10, 20 years down the road, we have done enough things so that people throughout the world know that this kind of effort is going on at K-State. This kind of effort is going on right here.
Comments there from the Dean of the College of Agriculture at Kansas State University, John Floros, as well as from Harold Lonsinger, who, along with his wife Olympia, have gifted 2,300 acres in Osborne County to the university to pursue sustainable agricultural research on what will now be known as the Lonsinger Sustainability Research Farm. It was formally dedicated in ceremonies this past Wednesday. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Now, this break. We'll return with today's agricultural news headlines for you, along with this week's edition of the Kansas Wheat Scoop with Marcia Boswell. And once more, with Mary Knapp under the weather and away today, we'll visit with K-State's Ron Graber about that Backgrounder Feedlot Field Day coming up in early October. All that yet to come here on the K-State Radio Network.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Agriculture Today is back now on the K-State Radio Network. And again, glad to have you along. Eric Atkinson here. Now to today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. 8 Kansas agricultural commodity, pork, and commission groups released a joint statement yesterday stating their support for efforts to improve the Kansas economy. This statement was released after the decision earlier in the week by Tyson Foods to put their plans on hold for that proposed $320 million chicken processing facility that was to be built south of Tonganoxie in Leavenworth County, northeast Kansas. Now, that decision came after the Leavenworth County Commission reversed its support of issuing $500 million in industrial revenue bonds to help finance that plant. The commission made the decision amid growing opposition to the plant from Leavenworth County residents. The proposed facility would have brought 1,600 jobs to that area. Now, quoting from that statement, we applaud the state of Kansas and other stakeholders for their continued efforts to improve the Kansas ag economy, create jobs, and expand local markets for Kansas farmers. Private investment is critical to improving the Kansas ag economy, which is going through some of its toughest times since the 1980s. The statement went on to say the construction of a new agricultural processing facility in Kansas, again quoting here, a great way to encourage growth and provide job security for both rural and urban Kansans. The statement was signed by the Kansas Association of Wheat Growers, Kansas Farm Bureau, Kansas Soybean Association, Kansas Corn, Kansas Grain Sorghum Producers, Kansas Wheat Commission, Kansas Soybean Commission, and the Kansas Pork Association. The Arkansas State Plant Board has told the herbicide industry in no uncertain terms that it does not believe new formulations of dicamba can be used without significant amounts of volatility and other off-target movement. The board unanimously approved regulations that would ban dicamba applications after mid-April, essentially limiting its use as a post-emergence herbicide. During its fall quarterly meeting in Little Rock, the plant board forwarded on for public comment regulations that ban dicamba applications from April the 16th until October the 31st, starting next year. That would allow fall and spring burn down or pre-emergence applications of the herbicide on most extended dicamba-tolerant seeds, but would essentially outlaw most in-season use. The board also, after lengthy discussion, unanimously denied the consideration of a petition from Monsanto to throw out the in-season limitations. The company called the proposed rules arbitrary and capricious and threatened to sue the state of Arkansas if that ban moved forward. Now, the new dicamba regulations will move into a 30-day public comment phase with a full public hearing scheduled for November the 8th. Once all comments, written and oral, are summarized, final regulations will be submitted to the Arkansas legislature for potential codifying into law. Next week, a U.S. trade mission will be exploring American agricultural export opportunities in Brazil. Here's more from the USDA's Stephanie Ho.
USDA's next agricultural trade mission is to Brazil.
We chose Brazil because it's changed a lot in the last 20 years.
That was Mark Slupek, Deputy Administrator of the Office of Trade Programs.
Brazil's growing population and rising per capita income, coupled with the fact that Brazilian consumers have a high regard for U.S. products and brands, make this a market that's currently underserved by the United States and one well worth exploring for American exporters.
Brazil does compete with the United States with some ag commodities on the world market.
But it's also a major importer. In 2016, Brazil imported $10 billion worth of product from around the world. We want to be part of that.
Last year, Brazil purchased nearly $1.4 billion in agricultural and related products from the United States. The top exports include ethanol, wheat, prepared foods, and dairy products. This is Stephanie Ho for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
You're listening to Agriculture Today. Time now for this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. Here's Marcia Boswell.
On September 19th, U.S. Senators Joni Ernst, Angus King, Joe Donnelly, and Susan Collins introduced the Cultivating Revitalization by Expanding American Agricultural Trade and Exports Act, or CREATE, which will double the annual funding for the Foreign Market Development and the Market Access programs. On May 3rd, the companion bill was introduced in the House. U.S. Wheat Associates represents U.S. wheat farmers in overseas markets and is a participant in the MAP and FMD programs. Private funding for U.S. wheat's export market development activities comes from 19 state wheat commissions and qualifies U.S. wheat to compete for program funds. For every dollar wheat farmers contribute, they earn an additional $2 in MAP and FMD funding. A recent study showed that between 2010 and 2014, every dollar wheat farmers invested in the program generated an additional $149 in U.S. wheat exports and returned $45 in net revenue back to farmers from the increased export demand. Agricultural export market development programs funded through the Farm Bill have contributed an average of $8.2 billion per year, a total of more than $309 billion to farm export revenue between 1977 and 2014, according to a 2016 study conducted by noted land-grant university economists. The study results also showed that the economic lift created by these programs directly created 239,800 new jobs, including 90,000 farm sector jobs. Despite these successes, MAP and FMD funding has not increased since the 2002 Farm Bill. Dr. Gary Williams, professor of agricultural economics and co-director of the Agribusiness, Food, and Consumer Economics Research Center at Texas A&M University, who led the study, said these programs have accounted for 15% of all the revenue generated by exports for U.S. agriculture over that time. National Association of Wheat Growers CEO Chandler Gould made the following statement. With the United States exporting 50% of its wheat, a strong trade agenda is essential for growing and opening new markets for wheat growers abroad. The Market Access Program and Foreign Market Development Program have proven to have an excellent return on investment and increase the global demand for wheat while raising farm income here at home. These programs provide the U.S. agricultural community with the tools needed to retain its edge in an increasingly competitive global economy. The National Association of Wheat Growers commends these senators for working across party lines to introduce the CREATE Act, which will help American farmers create, expand, and maintain access to foreign markets. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marcia Boswell.
Thanks, Marcia. Again, K-State's Mary Knapp is under the weather, no pun intended, can't be with us today to talk Kansas agricultural weather. So in a moment, we'll hand it on over to Sarah Moyer and her guest here on the K-State Radio Network. This is Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Sarah Moyer, here to talk about an event that's upcoming for cattle producers, and across the way to help us, K-State watershed specialist Ron Graber. Good to have you on, Ron.
Good morning. Good to be here. We have a Feedlot Field Day that we're calling it coming up on October 3rd, and our group had been talking about feedlot maintenance and some of the things that folks could do to not only make their operations a little more environmentally friendly, but also aid in terms of how well that feeding operation functions. And so, coming from that discussion, we started looking for sites that would be a good place to host an event like this where we could talk about some of those issues. And one of the operations that came to the forefront was Moyer Ranch in Lyon County. And so several of us went and took a look and visited with Jared and just talked to him about how he manages his operation and some of the things that he's got going on there. And we just thought it was an excellent site to showcase some of the things that we talk to livestock producers about, pretty much on a daily basis.
There are speakers to go along with that to provide some additional information. Will you go ahead and run down who will be at the event?
Sure, be happy to. Producers utilize a couple of different ways of backgrounding cattle, and one of the really neat things about this ranch is that those two areas are both being utilized and available for us to highlight. One is utilizing grass traps where we maybe have some permanent feed bunks, and We can supplement those cattle on a daily basis, but yet they're out grazing part of the time and in a situation where they're not necessarily confined. The other area would be a true confinement system where we confine cattle to a smaller area, and it would be what we would think of as in terms of bare lots, and certainly we've got more opportunities there for runoff when we do get rain events and that sort of thing. So we'll try to highlight that, some proper ways to manage those confined areas. And some of the folks that we've asked to come in and kind of help us discuss these things, one, Jamie Lynn Farney out of our Southeast Area Extension Office. She's a beef system specialist, has been doing a lot of work the last couple of years with cover crops and looking at ways that we can integrate cover crops into livestock operations. That's kind of the buzzword for soil health, and we think there's certainly some ways we can fit those into beef operations. And so she's going to talk a little bit about incorporating cover crops into some of those grass traps and how those can best be utilized. Along with her on that part of the field day, Herschel George, one of our watershed specialists in southeast Kansas, is going to talk about watering systems and how do we deliver clean, fresh water to those cattle out on those grass traps. And Herschel's done a lot of work with solar pumps and alternative water supplies, so he's going to share some of his expertise in that area. From there, we'll move on to more of the confined area and talk a little bit about some of the maintenance things that go on there and just things like scraping and how do you manage that manure and where do you put it, and a little bit about using some grass buffers and those sort of things down below those pens to catch and trap any solids that might leave those lots. Will Boyer, our watershed specialist from northeast Kansas, will address that topic. I will be addressing a little bit of site selection, and we often hear real estate agents talk about location, and that really is true with livestock operations as well. There are some sites that just aren't good places to feed cattle, and so we'll talk a little bit about siting livestock feeding operations if we intend to confine them, and some of the things that go along with that in terms of some of the regulations and things that make sites good sites and bad sites. So that's kind of the part that in terms of managing the operations. The other part that we want to talk about a little bit is Jarrett has put in, a lot of folks are talking about using bud box, which is a type of cattle handling system when you're going through the processing facility. And gosh, Jarrett's kind of out on the forefront in terms of putting in one of those bud box systems. So we'll kind of finish up the day spending some time talking about how do we handle cattle and how do we utilize that bud box in a system. Jarrett will talk about some of the things that he's learned from using his system and some of the good things, some of the bad things. A.J. Tarpoff, who is our extension beef veterinarian, has a lot of expertise in that area as well, and so he'll be on hand, and they'll kind of tag team that part of the day to explain how bud box works and again, some of those things that go into cattle handling.
A plethora of resources available here at the field day, a good program compiled, a little bit of something for a lot of people available on this day, and there's also a meal included, and with that, there's an RSVP. Will you tell us more, Ron?
Sure. We are asking if you intend to come that day and spend a little time with us that you let us know either by email or by telephone. Brian Reese, the Lyon County Extension Agent, will be accepting those RSVPs. You can reach him at area code 620-341-3220, or his email is brees@ksu.edu.
Who would you predict, as far as producers considering to come to this event, would benefit most from the lineup here?
Well, I think anybody that is backgrounding or feeding cattle could find some things of interest in the day. Whether you're looking at doing some grass traps or whether you're confined feeding. And I think there will be things that, could apply to somebody that's been feeding cattle for quite a while, or maybe even if you're looking at building some new pens, expanding, adding some pens. I think there's, there'll be some things that you can glean from the speakers and take home. And, we've said that we're kind of targeting the backgrounding industry, but certainly a lot of the things that we'll talk about would apply to guys that are finishing some cattle as well.
Well, thank you, Ron, for telling us more about this Feedlot Field Day coming up on October 3rd. It's good to have you on.
Thank you. Really good to be here.
Once again, that was K-State Watershed Specialist Ron Graber, one of the speakers, and encouraging producers to come out to the Feedlot Field Day north of Emporia, Kansas. Once again, if you'd like to RSVP, you can contact Brian Reese at the Lyon County Extension Office. That phone number 620-341-3220, or email Brian at brees@ksu.edu. I'm Sarah Moyer for Agriculture Today. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Sarah. And once more, K-State's Mary Knapp will be back with us as usual next Friday to visit about Kansas agricultural weather. That's our time for today. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy your weekend. For Sarah Moyer, Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.